Okay, thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here talking about I4C and, generally speaking, my work in the past 9 years, basically. So thank you a lot. I'm Silvio Peroni. I work at the University of Bologna in a department of classical philology and Italian studies. First of all, I just would like to introduce who am I and what I've done recently, at least, in research and also in my background. So as I told you, I'm working at the University of Bologna, but my grounding, my study were in computer science. I'm still a computer scientist, even if I'm working at a humanities department. I had the chance to work for a brief period in different UK universities, like the University of Oxford and the Knowledge Media Institute. And during my, let's say, period abroad in UK and also in a laboratory at the National Research Council in Italy, I've had the possibility of studying a lot about semantic web and semantic web technologies, and in particular the managing of data by means of this technology. And just to clarify what are my research topics, at least in the past 2-3 years, I've made that tech cloud there. It has been built by using the abstracts of my paper, and I done it just because it is pretty clear that I'm focusing on data in my research, and in particular the use of data. And before to start formally the presentation by introducing the topic of my talk, I would like to acknowledge some people. I don't read all the names, but I know that usually the acknowledgement will be made at the end of the presentation, but I will prefer to thank all these people just at the beginning. Surely I have forgot someone here, but I hope they can apologize me for this. So the first part of my presentation will be about citations, in order to define what they are and what is the difference between citations and open citations. That is the main point of my talk. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, they provide a pretty good definition of the verb to cite, which is to refer to something, a passage or book or even an author, as evidence for or justification of an argument or a statement, especially if we consider scholarly works. The importance of citations, in particular for the scholarly domain, are pretty clear. They are used for knitting together our scientific and cultural knowledge, and this has been also, let's say, stated by important scientists in Europe like Isaac Newton, that in a letter sent to a friend say explicitly that he was able to see further because he was sitting on the shoulders of giants, where in this case the giants were all the scholars that have made impressive amount of research work before him, and that him was using for building the new research he was presenting to the research audience. Funnily enough, when I started to work on these specific topics, I had a clear problem of talking about citation, generally speaking, with a fellow researcher. The main issue was about basically the semantic overload of specific words that are used to referring to a lot of components of the citation, where it happens and so on. In particular, looking at the picture that is in this slide, you see that informally, by speaking with colleagues, we basically use the word reference actually to refer to a bunch of different concepts that are the article that is cited, as well as the specific part in the reference list that we use to define such cited article, as well as the specific pointer within the text that points to the reference, and so on. So what I worked on, I started to work on it basically 9 years ago, and I'm still working on it, is just to provide a specific formal definition for each of the components that form in the end a citation. And this is explained somehow in the picture in the bottom part of this slide, where you see that we use different words to refer to the different concepts that are around a citation. And according to this definition that we have provided in some formal model I will present in the next slide, we define a citation as a conceptual directional link from a citing entity to a citing entity. So the concept of paper A cites paper B, the whole thing makes the citation, formally speaking. So in order to formalize these specific vocabularies for citations and beyond honestly, in a specific model we have developed together with David Sutton, starting in 2010, a set of complementary and orthogonal models called sparrow ontologies in order to describe the various aspects of the publishing domain, including citations. And all these models or ontologies, as we refer to, are all available in Creative Commons Attribution License. That means they are totally open access, anyone can reuse them for any purpose basically. And we have also created a website that contains a lot of description about the ontologies, some example of usages, the documentation, and this kind of stuff in order to help possible adopters to use these ontologies for their own purposes. And so this is just a diagram describing these models that I've just introduced to you. These parentologies are the dark blue boxes in the diagrams, and these ontologies basically allow you to describe several aspects of the publishing domain, and in particular there are some of those that are the green one that I highlighted in green that are devoted to the description of citations and all the other concepts that are around citation in scholarly documents. So this is just to have a kind of initial setting of the fact that we have a precise definition that we will follow from now on about what we mean with citation. So having clear that a bibliographic citation is a conceptual directional link from a citing entity to a cited entity that has been made by an author for the purpose of acknowledging or ascribing credit for some contribution made by someone else, we now define what are citation data related to a citation. So, citation data related to a particular citation are composed by two different things. The first one is the representation of such conceptual link, linking the citing paper to the cited paper, and the second one are the basic metadata that we can use for describing the citing entity and the cited entity, where basic metadata are, let's say, sufficient information for create a bibliographic reference that you should add to the reference list of your paper. So, having cleared these premises, we say that a bibliographic citation is an open citation when the data, the citation data that we need to define such citation are compliant with the following 5 principles that I will introduce in the next slides. So the first principle is that citation data must be expressed in a way that can be easily processable and understandable by machines, not only humans. For instance, this is just a reference included in a reference list of a journal article, okay? And while it is pretty clear what are the various parts of these references for us as humans, because there are kind of different layout that allow us also to identify the various points, this is not a structured data, this is unstructured. With structured data, I mean something like that. So using a specific format, in this case JSON, to represent exactly the same information, but in a way that is processable by a machine, where we have clearly identified fields for each of the part of the reference we are talking about. An alternative representation still in structured format, which is the one that we are using, honestly, that I'm using for my job, is the one in RDF. So this is a kind of alternative representation of the previous one, of the same citation, okay, by using RDF, which is a format developed within the semantic web domain, the main format for representing data within the semantic web. The other principle is that citation data must be available without the need to access the specific source article where the citation are defined. So they should live in separate with the article that actually define it. For instance, this is an example where the citation actually are binded within the article itself. When you write an article, usually you put in the reference list a series of references that are the paper that you are citing, and this citation may be available, but still they are just binded to the article itself, and this is something that we don't want when we talk about open citation. What we want is just having the possibility of asking for the citations defined within an article without accessing the article itself at all. This is just an example. It's a list of citation returned in JSON format that are returned by a service that we are developing at Open Citation. I will talk about this organization in a while. That you can just ask, please provide me all the references, all the citation that have been cited within a specific article identified by a DOI. The third principle is that of openness. So the point is that all this data we were talking about must be freely accessible and reusable without any restriction. That means, for instance, that they should belong to the public domain, or another example that we are suggesting is that they should be published according to the CC0 universal waiver or license that is made by Creative Commons for releasing open data. So just for making an example of what we mean with close, then here there is an extract from an article where there are two explicit citation indexes mentioned that are Web of Science and Scopus. They allow people to access data if you pay a lot of money basically for accessing them, and then when you even pay this fee, you cannot do whatever you want with the citation data you get back, because there are specific licenses that avoid, for instance, to republish this data. What we want is something like that is claimed by different organization and project that works around open citation data, that are saying basically that all the citation data and metadata about bibliographic resources that they made available must be freely accessible and reusable without constraint because of the specification of specific license or because the organization just doesn't do any claim of ownership on this data, that are just facts. Finally, the last two principles in just one slide are that the citing and cited entities that are involved in a citation must be clearly identified by using a specific identifier scheme, such as a DOI or a URL. And the last principle that is more or less related with the previous one, the identifiability of the citation of the entities involved in the citation, is that of availability. That means basically that it must be possible to use a resolver, a service available online that allow you to specify the identifier of the citing and cited entities and obtain, as a result of this request, the basic metadata, so the title, the authors, the publication date, and so on, of these entities that should be also structured, separate, and open as well. So these are, let's say, the premises that I will use for the rest of the talk. When I talk about open citation, I refer to citation data that follows these 5 principles that I've just introduced. So in this slide, I would like just to quickly introduce the steps that have been made to reach the current status of open citation data since the 2010. The first event happened in 2010 when the Open Citation Corpus was released as one of the main outcomes of a JISC project named Open Citation Project, directed by and owned by David Shatton from the University of Oxford. Then there was a talk done by David Shatton in the annual conference of the Open Access Publisher Association, where he was introducing and trying to push publishers to release in mass citation data in the open domain. However, nothing really happened until 2016, where some of events were organized. The first one was the first Wikisite workshop. Wikisite is a project that want to work with Wikidata, the database made available by the Wikimedia Foundation, for including also bibliographic metadata and citation for the entities included in Wikipedia articles. Then there was the launch of the new instance of the Open Citation Corpus. So the same release, the same project that David started in 2010 was renewed somehow. I was involved as director at that time, and we released a new instance of the corpus with the servers available at the University of Bologna. And then in September 2016, Dario Taraborelli, that is the main person behind the Wikisite project at Wikimedia, he was working at the Wikimedia Foundation at that time, was invited to have a talk in the same conference David talked 3 years later, a bit before, so the conference of Open Access Publisher, and he discovered something amazing, that even Open Access Publisher didn't release at that time Open Citation data as open material. And the funny thing that actually the publisher, not only the open access publisher, the publisher in general, already deposited citation data into a specific platform that was Crossref, but they didn't know mainly that these data were closed somehow. And so, from these premises, a bunch of people, including myself, started to talk about how to convince publisher to open up their citation data in Crossref. So what was the situation? Before April 2017, the fraction of publication that had open references specified available in Crossref was just the 1% of all the million of articles with references that were present in Crossref. And talking informally with publisher, we have discovered that basically, even if publisher were depositing this data in Crossref, they actually really didn't know that these data are not in the open part of the Crossref database. Only the metadata of the articles were open, but the reference list, because of commercial possible issues, let's say, were kept closed. And so, in April 2017, we launched this initiative for open citation. The goal of the initiative was only to persuade the major academic publishers around that are already depositing reference lists into Crossref to open them up and release all of them just in one big event, let's say. And the key benefit we highlighted to publishers in order to convince them in doing that was basically the possibility of having this public web of scholarly links that enable additional access points to articles published by the publisher itself, and also allow in principle to follow how research evolves in time, and also it enables the creation of new services upon this data. And so we started to basically do it, and the 6 founders organization that were involved in the whole thing are these 6 guys that counts also Open Citations as organization, as one of the partners, as funders. And we were able to get the support of a lot of stakeholders, ranging from founders to libraries to associations to research projects that supported us in the whole initiative. And since the beginning to February 2019, we were able basically to convince more than 750 publishers to be part of the initiative and releasing their citation data as open material within Crossref. So the result of this is now we have improved the availability of open citation data, starting from 1%, that was the situation before April 2017, to 55% in February. So we have more than 500 million citations available as open citation in Crossref. And starting from this data, a lot of things started to happen. So a lot of even companies were born and for using this data and produce new services, and we organize also a lot of events, in particular the workshop on open citation and Wikisite 2018, in order to kind of advertise more and more communities on the importance of this movement of releasing open citation data to the public domain. Who is missing in this picture? Well, actually, among the top 20 DOI depositors in Crossref, there are 5 of those that are not joining the I4C. And are these 5 guys here, okay? The point is that while the first 2 guys are commercial entities, so they see citation as assets, so as money, if you want, the other 3 are scholarly societies. And that was quite funny, in particular because these scholarly societies admit themselves in their website that they are acting for the benefit of humanity, but then they are not releasing some kind of important data that actually will benefit the whole humanity. So it's a kind of a contradictory claim with what they say and how they act. So there have been several kind of events and things that happened after the release of Open Citation. Society that are claiming, like the Scientometric Society, that are claiming that open citation are important for them. Some kind of pressure letters to founders in order to kind of mandate open citation for their grants, and National Open Science Plan that start to acknowledge explicitly I4C as one of the things that should be used within the open science world. And we get similar support also by other initiatives. Here are 2 other examples. The DORA, the 4 is a kind of community that try to write a declaration for new research assessment strategies, and also Plan S, that is a European thing that is pushing for gold open access in just a few years for all the research that happened in Europe, basically, that are explicitly acknowledging the principle behind I4C that should be implemented in large by all the publishers for releasing open citation data. Even Crossref, that is not one of the company or initiatives, let's say, within the I4C, okay, is developing services in order to help users to understand if a publisher is following the principle of I4C or not, so as to identify who are the good guys and the bad guys, let's say, formally speaking. And this is something that have prepared. This Crossref participation report is a service online. This last slide is just to let you know how easy it is for a publisher that is already depositing these metadata into Crossref, so the reference list of papers into Crossref, to ask Crossref itself to open up all the citation. The only thing that the publisher needs to do is to send one single email to Crossref saying, please, can you open all my citation data? And that's all. So the question that usually comes at that point is what I can do by using all this data. So I just want to take 10 minutes to describe something, a research that I'm doing with colleagues that is entirely based on open citation data available in Crossref. So our main goal is try to understand if there is an automatic strategy for defining what humanities as a research area is, considering that the major database with citation data actually includes humanities within a bigger area that is the social science and arts and humanity domain, that is a bigger discipline. And for doing that, we are using some additional tools that are available online, such as AI Plus, which is a kind of service that made available the list of some, not all, journals that belong to the humanities and social science domain. And we basically took the disciplines defined by these AI Plus things and try to involve experts to classify each discipline there as humanities and or social science. And then we look at how many of these journals were present in 3 different databases containing citations. Crossref, that is the one that I've talked so far, Scopus, and Web of Science. And we saw that actually the Crossref database has the wider coverage of these arts and humanity journals than the other 2 that are commercial services. And this one is just a picture that allows to understand in Crossref what is the distribution of the publication in these journals described by AI Plus. And I have just a zoom of the very beginning of it. So these are basically all the journals in AI that are included in Crossref according to the number of articles that are described in Crossref. So by using an algorithm that is called Leiden algorithm developed in Leiden and Leiden University, we were able to identify basically the main 5 macro areas of research, so physical science, engineering, biomedical and health sciences, social science and humanities, mathematics and computer science, and life and earth sciences. The blue one, the blue bubbles on the right, define the big area of humanities and social science. So starting from here, we wanted to develop a kind of methodology for trying to find out what are the humanities within this big bubble of publications. To do that, we reused the Leiden algorithm, okay, and we try to cluster the various publications by means of the Leiden algorithm and try to see how many publications have been published in AI Plus journals that are typical, that contains humanities journal as well. And then we try to visualize the result to see what happened. So we find out basically the yellow one, the yellow bubble here are cluster of publication in which at least the 20% of the articles there, at least the 20%, have been published in these AI Plus journals. And you see that the main humanities publication quite grouped in that very rightest part of the diagram, okay, the yellow one. But if you see, there are other clusters like here, 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 here that are still yellow, but they do not belong to the main area of arts and humanities and social science that was before highlighted in this part, are more multidisciplinary things. And this graph, this diagram, shows the distribution of the cluster, so each bubble that you have seen in the previous picture, according to the percentage of humanities publication according to AI Plus journals that are included in each cluster. And if you see here, I've zoomed a bit on some areas, and here there is that specific cluster, and these are the main journals in that cluster, that actually contains more than 40% of humanities publication, even if this cluster belongs to the computer science macro area. So this is a clear example of multidisciplinary cluster between humanities and computer science. So, just for wrap up this specific research, these are the preliminary results that we have obtained. First of all, we have seen that the majority of a cluster that show the highest percentage of publication to journals that are included in RI Plus journals are actually included in the main field, the big macro area of social sciences and humanities. But still there are exceptions. As you have seen, there are some clusters that are not belonging to social science and humanities as a macro area, but still contains enough humanities publication. And according to the labels of the journals that are included in this cluster, it seems that these labels are somehow compliant with the social science and humanities fields, even if this cluster belongs to a very different macro area. And the important point of this exercise is that all the technology, the Leiden algorithm that I've presented you that is used for defining this cluster, use citations for defining the links and how the cluster are created. And the citation that we have used were those one available in Crossref, the open one. So basically, this research has an effective cost of €0 because all the citation in Crossref were open, available for anyone. Doing the same research by using some commercial indexes like Web of Science or Scopus is practically impractical because of the price of these services, first of all, but then because for doing that, you should have the full dump of the database. And this is not something that Scopus and Web of Science will allow you to have, usually. So the last part of my presentation will focus on a specific infrastructure called Open Citation. I'm one of the directors of this infrastructure and will introduce some sort of highlights of the past 2 years right now. So as I mentioned before, Open Citation actually started in 2010 after a one-year project founded by JISC and was run by David Shatton as director when he was at the Department of Zoology in Oxford, and the goal was to publishing open citation data in RDF, so in structured format, in order to make them available openly. And the outcomes of this project were mainly two. The first one is the release of the Open Citation corpus, so this corpus of open citation data, and the second one was the development of the sparrow ontologies that have been used for describing these open citation data. I was there in 2010 with David, working with him in an internship during my PhD, exactly doing these kind of jobs, in particular the development of the sparrow ontologies in this context. So we have just released a few years later a new infrastructure organization basically that is called still Open Citation. It is an infrastructure organization based in Bologna that is totally dedicated to open scholarship and to the publication of open bibliographic and citation data. And in addition to the open citation corpus that was the original outcome of the project, we now are releasing a lot of other stuff, including models for modeling citation data, additional databases of citations, and software and services for accessing them freely available online. And this is just a picture that shows the data model. So that describes the data model that we use for describing citation. I don't want to focus too much on the technical details here. I just want to show you the two main classes that are expressions based on Ferber specification that basically we use to record all the bibliographic entities there, papers for instance, and citation as a proper entity defined within the model. Because we wanted in our idea to define citations as first-class data entities. So our idea is that citations are more than simple links between the citing article to the cited article. But they actually are proper first-class entities. So there is the concept of something in the database that is the citations, that has attributes. One of these attributes has citing entity, citing article. Another attribute has cited article. And we also add additional information to the citation itself. For instance, to mark the citation if it is a self-citation, an author self-citation, an author that is citing itself, basically, or this kind of stuff. And since we now describe citation as proper entities that has attributes associated to them, we also invented a new persistent identifier that has been recognized recently by several people behind the identifications around the world that we called Open Citation Identifier. And the Open Citation Identifier are a very simple structure. It's made by this string, OK, column, number, dash number, where the first number identifying the citing entity and the second number identifies the cited entity. And we have made available also a resolver in order to get citation information starting from this identifier in different databases that made available open citation data, such as Wikidata, such as Crossref, and also, of course, the Open Citation Corpus, that is something that we handle. And about the dataset that we are handling, there are two different kinds of dataset. The first one is called the Open Citation Corpus, which is the original one, and now contains 40 million citation links between 7.5 million cited resources. And last year, we also launched the Open Citation Indexes that are just big containers of citation links, and that now includes only two indexes. The main one, that is Cocky, that I described in the next slide, contains 445 million citations between barely 46 million bibliographic entities. And all these services can be accessed and can be queried according to different things. We made available three different interfaces, let's say, REST API for both the datasets, Sparkle endpoint for who is expert in semantic web technologies, and also textual search. So if you are a human and you want to look at some of the data, there are textual interfaces that allow you to look at and look for data within. So Cocky, just to provide you a brief introduction to it, is the Open Citation Index of Crossref Open DOI to DOI citation. Basically, it is built by taking all the DOI to DOI links included in Crossref, in the dataset we can access in Crossref, and to convert them in RDF and just put all our services in front of it in order to access to this data. And the table in this slide show how many citation papers published by these publisher are doing to other papers or receiving by other papers. And if you look at the third line, Elsevier here has a very not proportionate value, just because Elsevier doesn't join the initiative for open citation, so we don't have papers, Elsevier papers, and the citation they made, basically, not a lot, just a few. So we analyzed the status of open citation versus closed citation by comparing the data available in Cocky with some of the metadata available in Crossref. And we found out that there are a lot of open citation available there to the public, but still the amount of closed citation in Crossref, in particular coming from the journals, are still quite high. And consider that 1/3 of these closed citation here, 1/3, are coming, all of them, from Elsevier. And what we wanted to do is just to try an experiment. So to make available another index accompanying Cocky that we named Crocky, or crowdsourced open citation index, where we ask people to submit their own citation, because you own your citation if you publish the paper, independently from the publisher who is publishing it. So basically, even if the uptake of Crocky is very limited so far, we had just a bunch of citation there, we have seen a lot of people that are trying to experimenting with it, and they are trying to produce this data and to allow us to publish all of them in CC0 within this new index. So I go quickly on this slide. It's just a list of collaborations that we are doing with different kind of entities about open citation. That includes Wikidata, for instance, OpenAir, but also individual researcher. And this is just a picture to show you the number of visits to our services that we got in the past year. And I will just focus on one important thing, that we started to use REST API actually in May 2018, and REST API quickly became the most used service for accessing the data, because this is what the actual user were requesting us. This is just a world view of what are the countries that are using these services, basically. And I would like to thank, for this specific part before the conclusion, our sponsors, let's say, the people that has granted us fundings for doing this job and that are supporting us currently, including our universities and our departments in Oxford and Bologna. So, for concluding my talk, the main point is that, as I told you, even if we are doing a quite good job, generally speaking, as a community, there are a lot of closed citation data that are yet there, and we should work for open them. And the important thing is that you should not believe that only to apply to Crossref is the only mechanism to release this data as open, because even Wikidata or the new index that we released, Crocky, allow anyone to publish open citation data there. So please use them if you are not going to work with Crossref but still want to release open citation data with this, within these databases. And what I've discovered by my experience is that, first of all, open citation data can be reused only if there is a specific free license associated to them. So the license is a crucial thing. And if you want to maximize the reuse of data, services should make available REST API for accessing this data. It is very crucial, and this is what I basically experienced on my work. And finally, I'm asking here your help, because anyone, according to all these specific services that we made available, anyone can publish open citation. And in particular, I think that libraries and repositories has a key role in doing and release a mass of open citation data available, where now we have only closed data. And in order to help, in particular, if you are handling an institutional repository, you should explicitly ask to your authors, the ones that are depositing the papers into the repository, to have the permission of release the metadata of the article, including the abstract and the references of the article as CC0 material. This is crucial to allow external services to parse this data and include them within this open citation, let's say, big and distributed data set. And that was my last message from my talk. So thank you for your patience and attention. Thank you.